Hi, this is Mark. This is a quick video to explain how the technology that we're using for the new ABF platform works. This is a non-technical demo, so you don't need to understand anything about technology, and I'll do another one that's a bit more technical for those that are interested. So here's a bunch of buzzwords. We love a buzzword in IT, so here's a bunch of things that are unlikely to make any sense to you if you haven't come across them before. Basically, the point of this video is to explain what each of these does and why it's important to our system. So how does it work? And by it, I think I mean the internet. So let's just take a simple example. This is a web browser. I'm using Chrome. You can use whatever you like. They all do the same job. And this is a text editor. So it's just a file. So I'm just editing a file here, and I'm going to write hello and save the file. Then I'm going to go to the web browser and I'm going to load the file. So the file's just living on my hard drive. And there we get hello. I can do slightly more complicated things. I can do formatting, so I can say heading 2, which is a sort of reasonably big heading, welcome, and then I can say hi Mark. Save that, go back across to the web browser and reload it, and now we get a bigger heading. So you get the idea. This is how we can control what the text looks like on the screen. I can also write some code inside this that will run in the web browser. So this is taking it sort of to a next level. So I can say page loaded. Now when I refresh this, it runs that piece of code. That piece of code just pops up a little message box, but it can do a lot more complicated things than that. So this is just to give you an idea that we've got control of what the web browser does. And then it also shows us our little message. So that's the basics of how the internet works. We load stuff off a file into a browser. I'm sure you're pretty well aware that the internet doesn't live on the hard drive of your computer, so normally you don't load it out of file, you actually load it off a server. This gives us a couple of things extra that we can do because the server can control the text that's in that file. So we also now have the ability to run code in the browser that I just showed you, that little alert window. That's a thing called JavaScript, and there's not much in the way of options there. You're basically forced to use JavaScript in browsers. They all support it. They don't support much else. So that's what we're using within our application to do things on the browser side. That's probably less than 10% of where the code lives. Most of the code lives on the server. So on the server, we've got a big choice of different things we can use. We use a system called Python to do that. And Python generates that code for us. So if we have a look, that's the code that we sent to the browser. So we can get Python to do that for us. I'll just run Python locally in here, and I'll just tell it to print what we want to see. I'll put in a couple of new lines just to give it a bit of space. And maybe we'll do that heading 1 thing again, heading 2, whatever. Oops. Hello, and then we end the heading 1 and we print it. So it does what we tell us to do. Now we can do more complicated things than that. We can set up variables, so I can say name equals Mark, and then instead of printing just hello, I can print name. And I'll say hello Mark, and then if somebody else comes on, it'll print hello John. So we've got control of it is the idea. So that's us now got the ability to control the server side of things and to control the browser side of things. We'll come back to the servers in a bit when we talk a bit more about that. But that's the basics of how we're going to write this application. I'm going to use a quick analogy here. So imagine you're a carpenter and you're going to build a kitchen. You go and buy a whole bunch of wood, some screws and nails, and you use your tools to build a kitchen. You measure it out, you put the kitchen in. It takes you a couple of weeks to finish off a kitchen. It's all very good. That's the equivalent of doing this coding in Python or JavaScript. It's low level and it takes quite a while to do. What you could do as a carpenter is you could go to IKEA and buy a flat pack kitchen, and you could put that together far quicker than you could build one from scratch. and we have the same sort of equivalent with what we're doing with the programming languages. So if we have a look, we've got Python, that's building our server-side code, and we've got JavaScript, that's doing the client-side code inside your browser. On top of Python, we run what's called a web framework, which is called Django. And what Django does is takes away all the repetitive stuff around building web apps. It also helps us with a lot of the security and things as well. So Django is like our IKEA kitchens for Python, and jQuery is our IKEA kitchens for JavaScript. Another piece in here which is Bootstrap, and Bootstrap is a product that was developed by Twitter. The easiest way to show kind of what Bootstrap does is to have a look at the application. So I'll go into this. This is the test system at the moment, or the development system on my computer. You can see we've got links to the dashboard, to the calendars, and so on. I can see my notifications. I can see my account balance. I've got $35. I can see my master points. I can see the level I am, and I can see these forum posts. So that's all fantastic, but it looks awful. So if I flick across to this one, this is the same thing, but just with Bootstrap enabled. So you can see it makes a massive difference in terms of how things appear, and it helps us to make the application a lot easier to use. So that's what Bootstrap's doing. So there we go. We've got what have we got so far? So Python, that's our programming language for the server side. JavaScript, that's to make things happen inside your browser. Django is IKEA kitchens for Python, and jQuery is IKEA kitchens for JavaScript, and Bootstrap makes things look nice. So we're almost there. There's only three more boxes to go, and you'll understand the whole system. Storing data is the next one to come to. So if we give Django and Python a bunch of data to store, they're going to keep it in memory or in files or wherever they can find to keep it, but it's not a very good way of doing it. So what you really want is a separate system that manages storing data for you, and that's a thing called a database, which you may have heard of before. So the database basically is like a filing clerk for us. So when a user connects to the system, Django says to the database, can you get me the file on user 34? And then opens up that file and it says, oh, this user's called Fred. This user has so many master points, has so much money in their account, etc. So, and when it's finished, it updates that and gives it back to the database to store. Databases are phenomenally expensive pieces of software. Companies like Oracle and Microsoft and IBM make an absolute fortune out of their database software. We're using a database you may not have heard of, which is called Postgres. So now we can see we've got a whole bunch of things in here, and you're starting to think, well, that's quite a lot of stuff. How much does all of this cost? And this is quite a strange thing with technology. Everyone's aware that technology projects and technology itself is very expensive. But what you're probably not aware of is that technology people give technology to other technology people for free. So all of those things that we mentioned there are absolutely free, don't cost us anything. In fact, that's a simplified version. We've got more than 30 components that are free software. Free software is usually called open source, which just means the source code is open for anyone to use. It's amazing because there are trillions of hours of effort gone into all of these things, and we can access them for absolutely nothing, which is great. And just as a small aside, our project is actually also open source. We've got a slightly different copyright on it, a different license, so a license called copyleft. So we're allowed to take all those things I just mentioned. We can do what we like with them. With our system, if you want to use our system and make changes to it, anything that you build from our system has to also be open source. So it's what's called copyleft. So that means that we'll always have access to anything anyone enhances within our system. Okay, now you probably heard of the cloud. What is the cloud? Well, the cloud's basically you're watching this video on either a computer or a phone or some sort of device. That device is capable of doing more than one thing at once. If you've got an email or a message at the moment, it would pop up. So your computer can do what you call multitasking, so it can do more than one thing at the same time. Um, we don't have to have our own dedicated computer for this. We can share a computer that's also running stuff for other people as well. Um, and I don't know what, now 10 to 15 years ago, companies like Google and Amazon and Microsoft realized that all the stuff they were building internally to run their applications would be just as useful for their customers to run their applications on. So they make this stuff available as a service. This isn't free. They've got to provide hardware and so on. So all the other stuff was free. This bit we have to start paying money for. But that's basically all the cloud is. The cloud is just a computer in somebody else's data center that they let you use and charge you for. We're using the Amazon system, which is Amazon Web Services or AWS. They're all much the same, but Amazon's the one we've chosen to use. Amazon has a bewildering array of different things that you can sign up for and use. It is quite complicated and tricky to navigate. Um, Even for our relatively simple system, we have all of these sorts of components. So we've got EC2 here is that shared server I was talking about. So that's a computer. We've got to have storage somewhere to keep all our files on. We have load balancers there that move data between places. We've got firewalls to keep all the bad people out. We've got the database that we talked about. And then we've got things like access controls and patching the servers and monitoring and so on. So it's all quite complicated to put all that stuff together. So Amazon provides you with an extra piece of software to help you use AWS, and that's a thing called Elastic Beanstalk. So Elastic Beanstalk basically allows us to easily configure all the bits and pieces we need. And remember, for this stuff, we've actually got 3 of these because we've got 2 test environments and a production environment. So there is quite a lot of different moving parts in this system. And Elastic Beanstalk basically coordinates all of that for us. Now, having said that all the AWS stuff is we pay for, Elastic Beanstalk's free. So we don't pay anything for that, only for the resources that it configures for us. So there you are, you've gone through it all. You know that Python is a programming language we use on the server, and Django is the web framework that we use to make that easier. So IKEA Kitchens for Python. JavaScript's the language in the browser with jQuery, making that easier. Postgres is a free database that does absolutely everything that we could want from a paid database, but doesn't cost us anything. Bootstrap makes everything look nice, and AWS is the cloud service where everything runs, with Elastic Beanstalk helping us out. So now that you know all of that, you're basically ready to go and get yourself a job in IT. So good luck.